You're listening to a Strode College creative media production.
Anxiety is running high around the impact of climate change.
Human activities are responsible for climate change.
In climate change, I worry about the future.
The impact of climate change is already being felt across Britain with increased rainfall, sunshine and temperatures.
Well, as we've been hearing, world leaders are gathering in New York. Climate action very much at the top of their agenda.
Our message to every country, government, business and part of society is simple. The next decade is decisive. Follow the science and embrace your responsibility to keep the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius alive.
The global climate talks to be hosted by the UK in Glasgow in November are now less than 2 months away. And today the UK government minister in charge of the conference, Alok Sharma, has been meeting his counterparts in China. As the world's fastest growing economy and a major polluter as well, China will be an all-important voice at the negotiating table.
Welcome to the Strode College Climate Podcast with Connor, Sam, Freya and Max.
Coming up on today's show, first up, it's Freya with the news. Then we go out and talk to people. Then we visit Interview Street. After that, there's top 5 climate criminals. Then to take us out, we've got climate fact or fiction.
So the news. In declaring an end to fossil fuel electricity, the Prime Minister is following advice of his Climate Change Committee, which says it's an essential staging post to reducing emissions to almost nil across the economy by 2050. Earlier this year, the National Grid said Great Britain's electricity system had been the greenest it had ever been on an East Bank holiday Monday. The warnings keep coming up of more heat waves, droughts, floods, and global temperatures going up and up and up. Seeing so many negative stories in the news only makes Ross feel worse. Like many, he worries it's already too late. Doing something, even if it's small, repeatedly, scientists said take action in their own lives to help ease their anxieties. Many were proud of the scientific work they've been part of, but some also spoke about doing simpler things: recycling, eating a plant-based diet, insulating their homes, going on marching, and engaging with politics.
Now, earlier on, we ventured out of the studio to ask some people some questions.
Did you know that 60% of young people approached in a recent survey said that they felt very or extremely worried about the climate? How do you feel about that?
Shocking.
Oh, it's shocking.
I'm very surprised that so many people are worried. Thought it was less.
No. I feel like it's frightening that 60% of people do feel like it's frightening, but I feel like more people should be worried about it, as it's a really big issue.
I agree with that statement, to be fair. I'm quite worried.
You grow up.
Don't give a shit about climate change.
What do you know about climate anxiety?
Nothing.
Very little. Schools need to teach us that.
People are scared that the environment's going to die.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Well, I know that climate change is a really big issue, and if we don't get on top of it soon, it could become too much of an issue to even tackle.
You're scared of the climate?
Nothing.
Are you concerned about climate change?
No.
Oh, definitely. Terrified.
Yeah. It's like going to die.
I guess, yeah, but I don't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
I think it is a massive issue, and if we don't get on top of it soon, there might be nothing we can do.
Yeah, no.
What do you think we can do to help climate anxiety?
Die.
I think we all need to work together, definitely, all of us.
Recycle more.
Release more stats so that people know what's going on.
I don't know.
I think we've got to support them, but I think we also need to start making proper actions, and the government needs to start making plans to tackle it.
Maybe don't actually put in regulations to actually not make climate change happen. I know what I'm trying to say, because what the government are doing, which really annoys me, is that they're making it our fault and our responsibility. When if I got rid of now 100% of my carbon emissions, it would only get rid of a second of what the big companies actually do. They need to put regulations on the big companies.
Imprison them.
Dunno.
Give me one thing you do that helps the environment.
Water the plants.
Got rid of my TV last week.
Recycle.
I mean, I get the bus instead of driving, so I guess that's better.
Recycling.
I try not to eat too much red meat, as that can cause small amounts of climate change. And I try to eat healthily and not.
I'm vegetarian.
Nothing. Get on the bus in the morning. That helps.
Do you think we're all doomed?
Hopefully.
No, definitely not. No.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Potentially. There we go.
I think not if we act soon, but if we wait too long, then it could be a really huge issue.
Yeah, we're f***ed, mate. We're all buggered. We're buggers. It's already too late.
Yes. No.
So as you can tell, many members of the public do not yet know or understand climate change. People who have a life and can't be asked to listen to the news, but who can blame them? Back to the point.
So as this whole thing is about climate anxiety, we should start talking about it. Freya, what exactly is it?
Well, Max, defined by the American Psychological Association in 2017, climate anxiety is a chronic fear of environmental doom.
Well, I consider myself educated. Moving on, a group of students and I went out and spoke to Jude Payne, who works in student support. Here are some of the highlights from that interview.
Today I'm here with fellow students from Strode College and Jude Payne from Student Support, and we're going to be discussing climate anxiety. Jude, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, hi. So I work with the student support team and look at the safeguarding and also admissions. So a lot about the student journey, and I've got a lot of experience in supporting students around mental health and anxiety.
In your own words, can you explain what anxiety is in young people?
Yeah, sure. So anxiety is actually a normal emotion. It's a physiological response to feeling threatened. So throughout history and time, we've always had this response. It's in the part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's how we respond to threats. Animals are exactly the same. So basically what happens is there's a stress response that's triggered by a perceived threat, and that is the fight or flight response. But what happens when anxiety becomes a problem is that actually the perceived threat either isn't a threat or there's an overreaction to it. So that the feelings that you have sometimes when you're having kind of anxiety, maybe around either going into a class or anxiety about leaving the house, it's a biological response that no longer is kind of needed. And so when it becomes too severe, then it can obviously be debilitating. But it is we all experience anxiety throughout our lives. It's a normal response.
How common is it in younger people nowadays?
Well, I would say I've been working in education for 10 years at least now, and I've just seen it grow.
Do you reckon that's because it's actually just naturally become more of a problem, or do you think more people these days are just more comfortable being open about it?
I think that's a really good point. I think it's actually both of those things. I think social media and people, has been great at being able for people to talk about it openly. So that's been a positive. But I do think social media has also fed into anxiety as well. So, but yeah, it's both scenarios. It's growing, but it is also more comfortable. People are more comfortable talking about it.
So moving on from that, what do you know about climate anxiety?
Well, I didn't really know much really before today. I've got two teenage girls myself, and they're both very active in their thoughts and feelings around the climate and around climate change. They both were involved in the protests when they happened before pre-COVID, and I think that really sparked an interest for them.
Is climate anxiety in a young person the same as being diagnosed with anxiety?
I would say no. Like I said earlier, anxiety is normal. It's a worry. It's a concern. When you start a new job, you feel anxious. It is natural and normal to feel worried about things that you're reading in the news and about the climate, because if we don't take control of it soon, we are going to see further issues. And it is something to be worried about, but it's not a kind of overarching. If somebody can't leave the house because of climate anxiety, I would say that's an issue with their anxiety, not actually a diagnosed thing regarding the climate. Basically, you can only do what you can do. You can't control anything outside of your actions. So when you're thinking about the climate change, you can do what you personally can do. So it's about making sure you're living your kind of highest, best eco-friendly life that you can, and including that is influencing your friends and your family to do the same. You can get involved in, the college and making sure that the recycling's and that people are turning lights off, etc. It's the small things that you can get involved in.
What help is there available to the students at Strode College about climate anxiety?
Okay, so we obviously have our student support team, and you have the tutorial system as well. So I think the tutorial system is really important within this, because if you're talking about climate anxiety, that's more around looking at what we can do to alleviate those stresses and concerns. So it's about coming together as a student collective and thinking about how we can kind of do better things in Strode College for the environment and to be more eco-friendly as a group of students. So I think the personal tutor and the tutorial system plays a really important part in that. At Strode College, we've obviously, as I mentioned earlier, got the student support team, and we do have, there's lots of leaflets and lots of online help as well. So there's lots of apps you can get around anxiety, like Headspace and Calm, just to help, really kind of ground yourself if you're having a moment that you need to kind of ground and be a bit more mindful about what's happening for you. It's really important to have a voice. And that's where I think, if you're really passionate about it, trying to get some kind of society together at college to give you some voice to kind of influence either people, who make the decisions at college, or for college to be able to go out and have a voice about, your fears around the climate and about what people should be doing. Like I said earlier, when it comes to any kind of anxiety, I like to write down what the concern is, what's worrying you, and then you look at what you can and can't control, and then you deal with it. But it's like any kind of illness. If you break a leg, you have to have physio to help you re-walk again. If you have mental health and anxiety, yes, you need support, but it is partly down to you being able to put things in place, use the strategies that are given. It's not something that's done to you, it's something that you're part of. It's your mental health, and it's really important to look after it and recognise the things you can do.
It's been great talking to you today. Thank you for talking to us.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. You're all very passionate about what you feel, and I think it's really important.
Where can people find you?
So I sit in admissions at the moment, so behind reception. But if you do need to find me in particular, or any of the student support officers, you go into student support, and if you need me, they'll give me a ring and I'll come over.
Great.
Well, there we have it. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, there were some great ideas in there. Anyway, we asked a little questionnaire, and here's Connor with the results.
Alrighty then. So, the first question that we asked was, have you heard about climate anxiety? 6% of people said yes, 40% said no. Next up is, we said, explain, if you can, climate anxiety. One of the answers that we got from someone was, when people are anxious about the changing climate and or the future. Next up, we have, are you concerned about the climate? 31% said yes, 43% no, and 26% said maybe. They don't know yet. Next up, we have, if yes, are you concerned? Are you concerned about climate? And here we are, next, this is someone else's answer here. We have, I'm concerned that the government really doesn't help with the issue. Next up, for our fifth question, we asked, do you think that you can make a difference in the climate crisis? 17% said yes, 39% said no, and another 39% said maybe. After that, we asked, what do you do to combat climate change? One person said, recycling. And we asked, do you recycle? 89% said yes, 11% said no. And then after that, we have, do you use public transport? 49% said yes, 16% said no, and 42% said sometimes. And that is it with the questionnaire.
Well, there were some great statistics there. Very interesting to hear from you listeners. Now it's time to take a stroll down Interview Street. Hello and welcome to Interview Street. Taking a stroll with me today is Sam.
Hello.
Sam's from A-Levels. On today's Interview Street, we're going to be discussing alternative transport. So let's get started. Sam, you don't like electric cars. Why is that?
The emissions are much less than petrol cars, but there are a lot of ways where electric vehicles aren't greener.
Well, then why is that?
Well, while driving, the lack of exhaust fumes might feel much cleaner, but one study in China says that producing an electric car produces 60% more CO2 than its combustion counterpart. This is mostly from the battery. Lithium, predominantly mined in Chile and Australia, is at the heart of the battery. Cobalt, another component in the battery, is mostly from the Democratic Republic of Congo, along with a load of other materials for the sake of time I won't mention. Mining these materials causes its own emissions. Between 5 and 15 tons of CO2 are produced per ton of lithium extracted. That's the same amount of energy 2 UK houses use.
So we both like cars, but electric cars don't give the same excitement. We can see this in Formula E, it's just not as exciting as F1. As time goes by, how are they going to retain the same excitement in the sport if or when fossil fuels get banned?
Well, speaking of F1, they made an exciting announcement last week for fans of the internal combustion engine. Formula 1 is aiming to field a generation of new power units by 2025. And the championship wants the engine to be powered by 100% sustainable drop-in fuel, designed to help Formula 1 achieve its goals of being net zero carbon by 2030. This 100% sustainable drop-in fuel, meaning it can be used in a standard internal combustion engine without any modification to the engine itself, will be laboratory created using components that come from either a carbon capture scheme, urban waste, or non-food biomass, while achieving greenhouse gas emission savings relative to petrol of at least 65%.
So this is exciting for petrol heads because we still get the roar of an engine but without harming polar bears and baby seals. Anyway, by 2030 it's projected that there'll be 1.8 billion cars on the road with only 8% of them being electric. So what happens to the other 1.6 billion? Well, as Sam said, F1 are developing a drop-in fuel that is 100% sustainable and can be used in all ICE engines without compromising the power. So petrol engines can still be used and enjoyed. As for diesel, that can go and die. So we've reached the end of Interview Street. Thanks to Sam for joining me, and now back to the other Sam in the studio.
Very insightful. Now it's time for top 5 climate criminals.
In this segment, we'll pull back the curtain on the climate criminals of the world.
Coming in at number 5, we have Amber Rudd, Tory Energy Sanctuary. Since taking the post after the 2015 election, Amber Rudd has launched a bonfire of the government's already thin green politics. On top of the Treasury cut, she has also stopped funding for onshore wind farms and effectively ended the Green Deal, which offered grants for installation.
And number 4, Matthias Müller, Chief Executive at Volkswagen. Volkswagen was hit by a scandal last year after it's found to have fiddled emission tests. Cars included a defeat device that defected when the car was being tested in order to beat the testers.
Just getting into the top 3, we have Benjamin Sporton. Sporton is the newly appointed Chief Executive of the World Coal Association, WCA, the body that represents the interests of the coal industry, with coal companies reeling from a plummeting coal price and the prospect of a global climate agreement spelling tough times ahead. The WCA's job is to somehow convince the world that it makes sense to keep on burning coal, the most carbon-intensive fossil fuel of them all.
Number 2, the Koch brothers. It's worth giving them 2 pieces when you consider the impact of Charles and Davis Koch. The brothers have a fortune of $30 billion each from their oil refinery firm Koch Industries, making them 2 of the top 10 richest people in the US.
Coming at number 1, Donald Trump. Trump has outright many times said that he thinks global warming isn't real, and sometimes add that it was invented by and for the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. He also frequently tweeted things like, "I'm in Los Angeles and it's freezing. Global warming is a total and very expensive hoax."
Coming up next, we find the true and the false of climate, fact or fiction. Yes, this is a game where I say a climate fact and you reply whether it's fact or fiction. Understand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Number 1, plants need carbon dioxide. Is that fact or fiction? Connor, what do you think?
I think that might be a fact.
Sam?
Fact.
Fiction.
Oh, well, Frey, you would be correct because it is fiction. They just store it. Number 2, the worst impacts of climate change could be irreversible by 2030. Is that fact or fiction?
I think that one might be a fact.
Fact.
Fact as well.
Yes, well, you're all right there. Now, number 3, the 20 warmest years on record have been in the past 22 years. Is that fact or fiction?
Fact.
I think fact.
Fiction.
Oh no, that's wrong. Try again.
It is a fact. Global warming isn't real because it's still cold. Is that fact or fiction?
That's fiction, mate.
That is fact.
Fiction.
Yeah, well, Sam, you were wrong there. It is fiction.
This is rigged.
More than 1 million species are at risk of extinction by climate change. Is that fact or fiction?
Fact.
Fact.
Fiction.
That last one was a fact. Now, I got some random facts here. Sam, did you know that in a recent climate anxiety survey of 10,000 young people across 10 countries shows the negative feelings about climate change that can cause psychological distress? Did you know that? Oh, wow. You're going to have your mind bamboozled. When asked, how does climate change make you feel? 68% said sad. Another 68% also said afraid. 63% said anxious. 58% said angry. 57% said powerless. 51% guilty. 32% optimistic. And only 30% were indifferent.
This study provides argument for anyone who has a connection to youth mental health. Climate change is a real dimension into their mental health problems, says Sarah Ray, who studies climate anxiety at Talbot State University in Arcata, California. Survey, the largest of its kind, asked 10,000 people in 10 countries how they felt about climate change and government response to it.
Now, more numbers for you to bamboozle your brain. When asked about how governments are responding to climate change, 65% of respondents agreed with the statement that governments are failing young people. 64% agreed that they are lying about the impact of actions taken, and 60% agreed that they were dismissing people's distress. Only 36% agreed that governments are acting according to science. However, young people do feel reassured when governments act.
When asked about their future, most children told us they are worried about the impact on the climate change will have on them when they're older, and 1 in 5 had even had a bad dream about it. But when asked about the action being taken by grown-ups to tackle the problem, 2 in 5 don't trust adults to tackle the challenges that climate change presents, and 2/3 say leaders aren't listening enough to young people's views.
Well, that's it. Thank you for listening. Cheerio. Say bye, guys.
Cheerio, love.
Goodbye.
Cheerio.